TOR GARADON looked on at the impregnable Bastille they had been summoned to destroy. Why was everything impossible to the Guard, never beyond our scope? A deed worthy of Astartes, always impossible. It seemed that the definition of impossible to most was if they could do it easily or not, was the wry thought of the captain. Nothing is easy, he thought. But you rise to the challenge or you do not. He looked on at the overlapping fire, the crenellations, pits, firing arcs. The fortress was made with some consideration, and not a little craft, for a bunch of cultist scum. Perhaps this would be a worthy battle, but he feared it would not. He suspected that as soon as the nut was cracked, that only a milky substance would be left inside. No nuts. Not that he craved war, or glory, or challenge. It was just nice once in a while. A bit of a challenge. Time to get it started, thought TOR GARADON. He was needed elsewhere, an agri-world called Abundantus Tertius. All hell was about to break loose, many said, and the Imperial fist would be needed. The siege had to get done, but TOR GARADON noticed one thing easily and swiftly. The ground had been prepared for the old ways of war. The traitors were about to be introduced to warfare post-crusade. At his command, smoke and incendiary was fired at the defences. Soon they were covered in a pea-soup thick fog. Air wings dove down and unleashed their full payload into the defences. They were swiftly followed by Inceptor squads flying down from high orbit, raking the battlements and clearing out any who survived the airstrike. Within moments, suppressors had then joined them and were hailing fire down into the hive, crippling or outright destroying defending armour as it moved to counter the assault. TOR GARADON stood inside his repulsor in the second wave. Repulsor executioners fired a withering barrage at the gates and hammered them down, with repulsors and impulsors carrying the men forward, while hovering over the tank traps, pits and wires put in place to halt or at least slow a conventional army. But all of the marine vehicles now swept over them and straight through to the breaches. With the Inceptors now moving forward from roof to roof, and the suppressors giving pinpoint covering fire, the advance of the second wave was swift. As soon as the ground became more closed, Captain TOR GARADON of the Imperial Fist ordered his men out of their transports. Squads of close support aggressors burnt every last building they approached. Many then threw open their doors as burning humans ran into the streets, only to be cut down by intercessor squads trailing behind the aggressors. And on they churned. Slow, steady, methodical. It was over within 2 hours. Impossible indeed. Psst. Now, on to Abundantus Tertius. Welcome, gentle listener. I am Baldermort, your faithful servant, and I wish to introduce you to the forces, factions, and faces of the Warhammer 40k universe. Today, in celebration of the new Primaris Marine Showcase, we shall be discussing a comparative rarity in the Warhammer setting, a new character. One who has crossed the Rubicon Primaris, in fact, the mighty scion of the Imperial Fists, Captain TOR GARADON. As he is so new, let us lean on existing wisdom to cover the basics of this mighty hero of the Imperium. To quote, TOR GARADON, the Bastion of Defiance. TOR GARADON is the Imperial Fist's longest-serving battle company captain, an unstoppable warrior in whom the lessons of the Primarch have been distilled to their most punishing form. Tested on 1,000 worlds, he is a master of the battlefield, an unyielding bulwark against those who would oppose mankind. Garadon was recruited to the Imperial Fists from the orbitals of Callisto. His wealthy family were only too glad to see him depart. Fate had cursed the young Garadon with a straightforward and stubborn nature, ill-matched to the glittering societal circles his kin frequented. During his first decade of service, Garadon earned commendation after commendation. Despite his deeds, Garadon never sought promotion, nor was it ever offered to him. Yet his silence concealed a sharp mind, if one little given to revealing itself except when absolutely necessary. The first time this truly came to the fore was during the Nosfer planet strike, when Garadon took command of the Third Company, upon Captain Opara's death, leading the survivors to strike a crippling counterblow from behind the Necron lines. When Julius Vogan took command of the Third Company, he judged there to be more to Garadon than others had allowed themselves to see, and took it upon himself to unlock the potential of his junior battle brother. By the time Garadon had earned a position in the hallowed First Company, he and Vogan shared an unbreakable friendship, one which would later see the younger Space Marine return to the Sentinels of Terra without hesitation, to serve as a veteran sergeant. Vogan and much of the Third perished during First Captain Lysander's disastrous attack on Taladorn. That any survived at all was to Garadon's credit, for he defied Lysander's orders and requested assistance from other chapters of Astartes. The aftermath saw a change in fortunes for Lysander and Garadon, who had both come to dislike one another intensely. Lysander was angered by what he saw as the sergeant's presumption, while Garadon fumed at Lysander's obvious arrogance. Nonetheless, the wisdom of Chapter Master Vladimir saw them bound together in the Crusade of Thunder. A demoted Lysander became the Third Company's new captain, with Garadon as his senior veteran sergeant. At that time, a desire to restore the Third Company was the only goal Lysander and Garadon shared, but in being forced to work together, each gradually came to see the other's strength. Garadon at last glimpsed beneath Lysander's hauteur to recognize the driven and penitent hero he truly was. For his part, Lysander came to rely ever more on Garadon's knack for improvised warfare and unflagging determination. Though it would be an exaggeration to say that the two became friends, a warrior's bond was nonetheless forged. More often than not, Lysander ceded command of the company's battle line squads to his veteran sergeant, while he himself led the Third's assault element against the foe. By the time Lysander was at last permitted to reclaim command of the First Company, Garadon was unanimously acclaimed the new captain of the Third, having proved himself beyond doubt on the battlefields of Taladorn, Drashin, and the Magor Rift. For nearly 3 decades, Garadon led the Sentinels of Terra to victory after victory, forging a new legend for a company that had once teetered on the edge of destruction. In those years, he was ever Lysander's most trusted comrade, and to see the First and Third Companies fighting as one was no rare sight. But Garadon had learned more than leadership from the elder captain. He had learned humility also, and the terrible price levied by unchecked pride. Thus Garadon cultivated allies with peers in other chapters where his own brethren would otherwise have stood distant and aloof. On many occasions he fought alongside Cato Sicarius of the Ultramarines, Culvain Brash of the Invaders, Castellan Draco of the Black Templars, and Erasmus Tycho of the Blood Angels, careful to learn all he could of their particular methods of war, and unfold them into his own company's combat doctrines. Indeed, it is said that Garadon and Sicarius even considered one another as friends, although given the Grand Duke of Talasar's famously cold demeanour, such rumours are generally dismissed as fanciful. Eventually, Garadon left the Third Company behind for command of the Second. He assumed this duty with great reluctance, for the prospect filled him with great foreboding. Within a year, the Third Company was ashes once again, slaughtered at Hydra Caudatus by the Iron Warriors led by Warsmith Honzu. Garadon wasted no time in petitioning the Chapter Council for the right to raise the Third Company's banner high once more, a request to which Lysander readily joined his support. Fortunately, many veterans of the Crusade of Thunder yet lived, having found service in other companies across the intervening years. Around this core, Garadon mustered Sentinels of Terra anew, drawing heavily from the latest wave of recruitments as rumours of a new Black Crusade gathered pace. Alas, for all Garadon's efforts, the Third was considered too inexperienced to join the deployment on the Eye of Terra's fringe. Forced to the sidelines while the Imperium burned, Garadon withdrew his company to Phalanx and trained them harder than ever. This proved an unexpectedly fortuitous decision, for it placed Garadon and the Third Company aboard the venerable battle station when it was most in need of champions to defend it. But for the deeds of the inexperienced Third Company and Garadon's own shrewd valour in leading them, the later days of Millennium 41 would surely have unfolded very differently. Certainly the Chapter Council believed so, for in recognition of these deeds, they appointed Garadon as custodian of the Hand of Defiance, a relic from the Great Crusade, of which no warrior since the legendary Chapter Master Lazarian had been deemed worthy. Some have speculated whether there might be some hidden hand guiding Garadon's fortunes. After all, he twice survived disasters that laid his company low, and was placed seemingly by chance in Holy Terror's defence, and then as a saviour of the Cadian diaspora. There are those within the chapter, particularly the aging veterans of the Crusade of Thunder, who believe that Garadon is marked for greatness, perhaps even by the Emperor himself. For his part, Garadon places no stock in such claims, instead citing warrior's fortune as his deliverer. So he forges on through the campaigns of the era Indomitus, determined to restore a sundered Imperium to glory. Ever striving to set the finest example to his battle brothers, Garadon went so far as to make hazardous crossing of the Rubicon Primaris in the hopes of binding the old to the new, in a chapter notorious for its suspicion of change. He has never again relinquished command of the Sentinels of Terror, refusing promotion to the most exalted rank, and under his tutelage they are the finest of the chapter's companies. Yet Garadon journeys increasingly alone. When he glances aboard Phalanx's muster halls, the captain sees too many warriors who do not recall a time before the Cicatrix Maledictum tore the Imperium apart, and worries that he is steadily becoming the proud, embittered relic he deemed Lysander to be at their first meeting. War has taken too much of Garadon's battle brothers, his fellow captains amongst them. Of his allies across the chapters, Tycho was lost to the Black Rage on Armageddon. Sicarius is missing, swallowed by the tides of the Immaterium. Brash perished in the firestorms of Gola, and Draco was declared excommunicatoris for deeds too terrible to recount. Only Garadon's old mentor Lysander remains, unyielding as granite before the storm, as if perhaps he too is preserved for some great and terrible battle yet to come. A battle the two warriors are destined to share. End quote. And here we see the reality of the future of the Space Marines, the crossing of the Rubicon Primaris. But what does that actually mean? Well, it means that TOR GARADON was born as a human, then passed the trials to become a Space Marine, and Astartes. Yet when the new Marines, the Primaris, were revealed to the galaxy, it was clear that they were larger, stronger, and more resilient than even their Astartes forebears. Thus are Astartes beginning to make the incredibly dangerous and excruciatingly painful transition from Astartes to Primaris Marines. But it is a horror to even consider. The things that make the Primaris more powerful are not simple. Each of the Primaris have 3 more enhancements above and beyond those of an Astartes. And here they are. Sinew coils, the steel within. The Primaris Space Marine sinews are reinforced with durametallic coil cables that can contract with incredible force, magnifying his strength as well as giving his body another layer of defense. A Primaris Space Marine can crush a man's skull in his hand, break flak armor to flinders, or even bite through a metal cable should the need arise. Magnificat. The Amplifier. A small thumb-sized lobe that is inserted into the brain's cortex. The Magnificat secretes hormones that increase the body's growth functions while also intensifying the function of its other transhuman implants, especially those of the Biscopia and Osmodula. In truth, the Magnificat is but half of the true dual-valve Immortis gland, the so-called God-maker, that the Emperor created for his Primarchs. However, Archmagos Call could only find materials and genetic blueprints to build the dextrophic lobe, the right half of the Immortis gland, while plans for the Centaurus The left half, that would complete the original super organ, had been wholly eradicated from Imperial records of the Primarch project. Whether this was done by the Emperor's own hand or by some nefarious source, Call could not tell. Belisarian Furnace, the Revitalizer. This is a dormant organ that connects to both Astartes' hearts. In times of extreme stress, or should the warrior's body undergo vile and damaging trauma, it expels great blurts of self-synthesized chemicals, a hyper-cocktail that stimulates the biological action of combat stims, while also aiding in the rapid regrowth of tissue, bone and muscle. The gland then falls dormant again, and takes some time to metabolically build up once more for the next usage. As we can see, but few really think about in detail, the transformation from Astartes to Primaris must be a time-consuming, incredibly skilled and life-threatening transition. It means the very alteration to the brain and most of the supporting system, for the implantation of the Magnificat and the Belisarian Furnace. Technical and tricky work to say the least. But imagine the pain of the transformation to sinew coils. The only thing close that I can think of would be the transformation of a certain X-Man, imbuing his bones with adamantium. But every last scrap of him was cut open to do this. Thus would it be for a Primaris, I would have thought. I have not yet come across a clear and specific extract on the process of the transformation, so if anyone knows of one, then a signpost would be very welcome. Alas, I now have a lot of reading to do, so apologies if it was somewhere glaringly obvious. So, to take the opportunity, to take the risk of changing to a Primaris Marine is no small thing. Not only will it mean pain and disfiguring, although these things are treated as little to a Space Marine, it also means retraining, re-equipping, and I would imagine a fair amount of time to both perform and then recover from, even for a legendary warrior such as the Space Marines. But the rewards. Increased size, strength, etc. In this modern age of war, in these new arenas of conflict never before seen in the history of the Imperium, there could be no other choice. For humanity will require every last one of its warriors to fight harder than they have ever fought before, just to prevent the Imperium being overwhelmed by the horrors that now accumulate in the darker space. Let us just hope that they are up to the challenge. I have been Baldermort, your faithful servant. I hope you have enjoyed this brief introduction to TOR GARADON and the Rubicon Primaris. If so, then please do consider liking and subscribing. If you do, then remember to hit the notifications button, as I would not want you to miss out. Now, no matter what you do today, do try to make time for fun. Toodaloo.